Hello, everyone. Once again, this is Dare to Speak. I wanted to do another type of video of gang history of, from what I understand, is the most dangerous organized gang or group that actually exists. And obviously, they're more dangerous than the Latin Kings, a lot more dangerous. And what this particular group is known as the Triads, the Chinese Triads, and even I guess for Japanese mafia people, the Yakuza gangsters. Now, Japanese mob, the Chinese mob, I guess whatever. But I guess, from what I understand, the Chinese crime syndicate or the this type of criminal organization is actually much larger and a lot more dangerous. Just to let you know, and I'm pretty sure that my information is correct. But the fact that they also, from what I found out in my studies, that a lot, pretty much, I would have to say all of it, is really no different than the early background of the Latin Kings, the Spanish Cobras, the Maniac Latin Disciples, and so on and so on. How they started off as a positive group at first, and then over the years they became corrupted and become, street thugs and a bunch of punks and troublemakers and shit like that. You know, because when you deal with drugs, I could understand when someone has to do it in order to survive, as a way of escaping poverty and stuff like that. I can understand that. I mean, it's wrong to sell drugs, obviously, because of the fact that it's risky, it's dangerous, and things like that. And also, the most important thing is, aside from going to jail if you get caught by the cops, the most important of all dangers is competition. Because now, since all these gangs are actually selling drugs, it's no longer an issue of survival. Right now, I mean, they pretty much have enough money to live a better life. But now, since there's so much competition, every poor uh, um, ghetto person who wants a piece of it, and they're not really mentally stable enough or mature enough, or to have enough ethics like the way they're supposed to, and they end up competing with each other, which leads to violence, leading to someone getting stabbed or shot, murdered, and stuff like that, all because of greed. It's no longer an issue of trying to survive. It may start off that way, but then eventually it would lead to greed. And greed is usually the main problem, not just with the street gangs, but that's how it is with mafia elements, with the Italian mob, German, Irish. It doesn't matter. Even during the time of Al Capone, when during the time of when liquor was illegal, a prohibition time period, when they started making a lot of money, yeah, they escaped, the poverty. They escaped, having to live, escaping the life of living rough, having, the hardship and stuff like that, and then having to go through racial bigotry and things like that, going in and out of jail, or just being harassed by cops and racist white people. I can understand that. But then they even admitted in one such documentary, and even from one show that I saw, in which one historian was actually saying that greed was a problem. People were getting greedy. Because so much money was coming in, they needed more. They needed more money, and then they just got greedy. That's just basically how it is. Now with the Triads, the Chinese Triads, like I said, they were no different. They started off as a positive group because of the fact that its actual origins, for those of you who don't know, the actual origins started from the Shaolin Temple. And with the Shaolin Temple, which is basically, for those of you who knows Chinese martial arts, and you know the Shaolin hand sign, the Han rebels were using, and also a lot of the forms of Chuan Fa, the Chinese way of the fist, a lot of the kung fu stuff they were doing. And the burning of the Shaolin Temple is really what started it. 5 of the grandmasters escaped when the Manchu government in 1670 burned the temple. They escaped, and also a small handful of Shaolin students, Shaolin rebels, Han rebels, also escaped, and then they pretty much started recruiting. They started forming their own secret societies to fight against the Manchus. That was in order to fight against the tyranny, because the Manchus were actually very corrupted, and they were like taking control of China ever since they overthrew the Ming Empire. And a lot of these rebels, Han rebels, were Ming supporters. They were still loyal to the old Ming government. They started off with these groups, and these groups were known as Triads. But the name Triads didn't really start like that. They started off with the White Lotus Society, which emerged, shortly after, and then there was the 8 Trigram Society, and there was all these other names, all these clans. But then the Han rebels, basically with their own, like the Red Boats, which they were a theater group, but then these Han rebels made friends with them, and then they actually used them as a cover. And a lot of these Han rebels learned acrobatics from the Red Boat theater troops, because there were professional acrobats as well as actors in theater. So they combined their acrobatic skills that they learned from the Red Boats, and they combined it with their own kung fu stuff like that, and that was the birth of Wushu, which means war arts. So that's the birth of Wushu, because without the acrobatics, especially all the jumping, tumbling, and basically all the acrobatics, it wouldn't be called Wushu. Now that's just one theory of it, and I actually believe it, so that's how it is. So the Triads started off that way. They were fighting against the government and fighting against oppression to overthrow the Manchus, which later on through the years, up until 1900, they formed a secret society that was actually an offshoot from the 8 Trigram Society, which was an offshoot of the White Lotus Society. And this group was known as the Fists of Righteous Harmony, or the Righteous Harmonious Fists, which is known today in history as the Boxers. And they started their activity mostly in the 1880s, 1890s until 1900 during the Boxer Rebellion. Over the years, all the way to the 1920s, 1930s, the name Triads is basically how it basically started. So they were against the government, they were anti-government, and they were doing illegal activities like bootlegging, and also with the booze, the prohibition thing, but they weren't exactly bad guys. It didn't happen until later on because the triads really meant something. They were a positive group. It wasn't until sometime during the 1950s, or I don't know, I'm not really exactly sure of the exact time period. But one historian, one man who was a triad member, said ever since the late 60s or early 70s, a lot of Chinese people that came from different parts of China, a lot of them had criminal records. And a lot of these young punks, he would say, he would get angry. He says, a lot of these young punks started joining up with the triads, and then over the years they became more like thugs. They pretty much abandoned the old ways of what the triads really stood for, and they pretty much, that's how the bad triads actually were created from these people. So that was his explanation of it, and it does make sense. I'm trying to remember what documentary that I saw that in, but that's what he said. So that's pretty much the background, the sum of it, of the Chinese triads, because they are the largest ones. They're much larger than the Latin Kings or any other group, or any kind of mafia elements or street gang. Doesn't really matter who they are. They're a lot larger and a lot more dangerous. The Chinese triads are not to be messed with. From what I understand, they really are that dangerous. And it's very sad how they started off as a very positive group that dates back to the Shaolin Temple, and being anti-government to being a criminal organization. I think it's just sad and fucked up. But so I don't know what you think. So tell me what you think if you have any ideas. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up. Questions or comments, you know what to do and stuff like that. So I hope this is education. Excuse me. I hope this is very informative for you. So to all of you, take care.